Hi, pre-algebra students. So this is your first lesson in Chapter 8 on volume and similar solids. So the first thing you're going to see on the front of your note packet is this list of reminders here. And just remember, we've learned about perimeter before in the past. That's when you're just measuring the distance around a figure. So like a fence, or if you take a piece of string and wrap it around something. So that's measured in feet, which is a linear measure. And then you have area, which is the measure of the space inside of a figure, and that's measured in square feet. So area is something flat and two-dimensional, like a rug, for example. So it has length and it has width. Volume is what we're going to be working with mostly in this unit, and that's measured in cubic feet because it's a three-dimensional measure. So things that are measured in volume, remember, that's the space that it takes up inside the figure, and that is a three-dimensional measure. It has length, it has width, and it has height. Okay, so let's take a look at our first lesson, which is on volume of cylinders. And hopefully you did some activities in class to help you understand how the formula was developed. So looking at the key idea, which is super important here, this is telling you the formula for the volume of a cylinder. It says it's the measure is the area of the base, and you're going to multiply that by the height of your cylinder. Okay, so in this case, just remember that a cylinder, anything that is described as a cylinder, has a base that is the shape of a circle. A circle is a two-dimensional measure. So remember, the formula for finding the area of a circle is pi r squared. And remember, we used this quite a bit when we were doing our fair game review. So you practiced finding the measure of two-dimensional circles. Okay, so when we talk about the area of the base, remember the area of the base, like it says right here, is the shape of a circle. So in place of that, you're going to put the pi r squared. And then you're going to multiply that by the height, because remember, that circular shape just keeps repeating over and over and over. It's like you're stacking those circles on top of each other. So you're taking the measure of the area of the base and just multiplying it by the height. And remember, we're going to use our calculator to help us do this. So if you don't have a calculator handy, please make sure you get one available. You can pause the video if you need to. I would recommend that you work through the calculations with me. Okay, so in this first example, it says find the volume of the cylinder, and we're going to be rounding our answers to the nearest tenth. So rounding is important. Make sure you do that correctly. So whenever you start with a formula, please always write your formula first. And I almost just started writing area, but remember, we're not measuring area, we're measuring volume. So I'm going to put V for volume. And remember, up here, really, I'm just going to rewrite my volume formula as pi r squared times the height. So you just need to remember, anytime you see that capital B for base, you're going to put the pi r squared in there. This is the part that represents your base. Okay, and once you do that, you just plug in what you know. Okay, so looking at our figure here, notice this measure halfway across the top of the circle is 3 meters. M is for meters. Remember, the distance halfway across is called the radius. So that's 3 meters. And then the 6 meters is your height. Okay, so we're just going to plug that into our formula. We're going to leave pi like it is. We're going to plug in the 3 in place of our radius. That'll get squared, and we're going to multiply that by our height, which is 6. Okay, so a couple of things about using your calculator. When you plug this in, first of all, you need to think about order of operations and what you're doing first. So remember, before you multiply anything together, you always have to square the radius first, because exponents come before multiplication. So you can either do that in your head in this case, because it's an easy one, and just simplify it. So we would say pi times 9 times 6. So remember, 3 squared is 9. It's 3 times 3, not 3 times 2. And then we're going to multiply that. You can do that in one fell swoop in your calculator. Please make sure you pay attention to the directions either in your assignment or whatever your teacher tells you. And sometimes we're going to use the pi button on our calculator, and sometimes we're going to use 3.14. Just remember, it depends on what the instructions tell you to do. So if you're using the pi button on your calculator, you would just press pi and then times 9 times 6. And I got 169 and then 0.6460033. So remember, I'm going to go ahead and round that. So 169, there's a 6, and then there's a 4. So 4 is less than 5. So this stays a 6. I don't round up. Okay, that's the number in my tenths places right after the decimal. And then remember, my label is going to be cubic meters. Okay, I'm going to calculate that the other way. So if I'm using 3.14 and do 3.14 times 9 times 6, I would get 169.56, which actually rounds to, whoops, it's 169.6. So it rounds the same way, but sometimes it could be slightly different. So just make sure you watch your calculations. It's going to be a little bit more accurate if you're using pi. Okay, let's go to our next example. This time it says find the height of the cylinder. Okay, so notice this time we're looking for the height. They're giving us the volume. That's an important measure. And then this 10 inches that's measuring all the way across. Okay, so this is actually our diameter. Remember, diameter goes all the way across the circle. So if the diameter equals 10, remember the radius is half the measure of the diameter. So that means the measure of the radius is 5 inches. So make sure you figure that out before you plug anything into your formula. Okay, remember again, I'm going to start with my formula. So volume equals pi times the radius squared times the height. And this time, again, I'm going to show what I know. So I know that my volume is 314. I don't need to put the label in. That'll come back when we calculate our answer. I'm going to leave pi. My radius is 5, so I'm going to have to square that. And the height, I don't know. So I'm going to leave that as h until I can figure that out. So I'm going to simplify this. So I know right now this just stays the same. I do know that 5 squared is 25. So in my head, I'm going to calculate that, or you can use your calculator, but you have to do the exponent first. So I'm going to do 25 times pi in my calculator. And since it's asking me to round that to the nearest whole number, I'm not going to actually round that yet. I'm just going to go maybe to the nearest hundredth. You can kind of round that however you want for right now. So it's 78.539. So that would actually round to 78.54 times the height. So notice what we have here is a one-step equation. So if I want to solve for the height, I have to divide both sides by the 78.54. So that's just one more calculation I'm going to do with my calculator. So I'm going to clear out my screen, and I'm going to put in 314 divided by 78.54. Okay, and it gave me 3.997. Notice, again, directions say round the answer to the nearest whole number. So I'm going to say the height is about 4 inches. Okay, and notice when I put that label on my answer, I'm just labeling it inches. I'm not doing inches cubed because the dimensions of your figure are a linear measure, so they do not get cubed. Just the volume is cubed, but the length, the width, the height, the radius, all of those are linear measures. Okay, so we're going to leave it at that. Okay, so if you haven't already, you need to pause the video and do the two on your own, or come back and do those later. We're going to take a look at example 3. So this is a little real life application. It says how much salsa is missing from the jar. So remember, if you look at the jar, they want you to figure out how much salsa fits in this empty space. So to figure out the amount of salsa that's missing, I'm going to take the entire height of the jar, which is 10, and I'm going to subtract the height of the salsa that's in the jar. So if there are 4 centimeters of salsa left, that means that 6 centimeters of salsa must be missing from the jar. So I'm going to calculate the volume of that space. So again, let's start with our formula. So pi r squared times the height, and I'm looking for the volume. So pi times my radius. Remember, this is my radius here. So 5 is equal to r. And my height is 6. So I'm going to plug that in. And again, I'm going to simplify that 5 squared in my head. If you're not good with exponents, you can use your calculator. I know that 5 squared is 25. So I need to find pi times 25 times 6 using my calculator. So pi times 25 times 6. And it doesn't tell me how to round this, but I'm going to go ahead and just round it to the nearest tenth, I guess. So it's about 471 and 2/10, and we would say this is cubic centimeters. Okay, so 471.2. If it doesn't tell you how to round, usually the nearest tenth or hundredths place is fine. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with that example. I want you to try, even though it says number 4 is an example, I want you to try number 4 on your own. I want you to see if you can figure out, again, it says about how many gallons of water does the water cooler bottle contain. So they're looking for the volume of that bottle. And then there's a tricky part in there. We will have to do a conversion, but I will help you with that in class. So we'll go over the conversion part together. You can surely try it if you want, but if not, we'll look at it together. Okay, so please finish up the on your owns and the problems you need to work, and we'll look more at volume of cylinders tomorrow. Have a great night.